Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I am Nicole and I live here in India. And today I'm going to be watching a subscriber recommendation, which is the Untold Story of Indian Space Research Organization Space Documentary. And this is from my subscriber, Alex Tom N4F. Thank you so much for recommending this. I'm looking forward to watching it. Now, we got into this discussion because I did a reaction for SpadeX. It was a video done by Think School. I'll go ahead and link that up above if you'd like to check it out. They are doing some amazing things. This docking experiment, which is about SpadeX, and then the actual plans to progress into an actual space station, and then from there to do a lunar landing with an astronaut to pick up, lunar samples. And I mean, we are, or I should say, India is wanting to progress on the space front for multiple reasons, not just because it's good for the Indian people, but it's also money making. And the way that India does it on like shoestring budgets, they are able to create and innovate, this amazing machinery that's going up into space. And then other countries are also then and organizations are having India take up their satellites, and it's actually making money for the country. And that's also fabulous. So this is a space documentary. It is a little bit long. I hope you can bear with me. I'm really interested in seeing, and learning more about the Indian Space Research Organization. Please, let's watch together. If you haven't already, give me your like, give me your subscribe, and let's go.
Why do we go to outer space? What's out there? And is it even worth it? So this video is different from anything we've done before, and honestly, I'm a little nervous, but it's a story that needs to be told. For most of human history, we didn't even know what our planet looked like. And now, today, we're out there exploring the farthest edges of the universe. But here's the thing that blows my mind most about space exploration: India. Yeah, a country that for many of its people is still a story of everyday struggles, and yet the Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, is contributing to the most extraordinary discoveries far beyond the reality we live in every day. It's a pretty huge deal because this isn't just about progress. It's about reimagining what's possible for all of humanity. And this is the journey we want to take you on today. And you will see it all: the people, their dreams, their spirit, the mind-boggling science behind it all, and how a developing nation defied all odds to reach for the stars and change the lives of millions.
ऊपर से भारत कैसा दिखता है आपको?
मैं बगैर किसी झिझक के कह सकता हूँ कि सारे जहां से अच्छा।
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Our story begins all the way back in 1940 at Cambridge University. And there's someone here you need to meet. He comes from a family of intellectuals, and his whole worldview has been defined by a deep curiosity and this unshakable belief in the power of science. His teachers call him brilliant. His colleagues, they see boundless energy. But nobody, and I mean nobody, could have guessed that this guy would become the father of Indian space exploration. What's his name? Vikram Sarabhai. In the 1940s, Sarabhai comes back to India for what he thinks is just a quick visit home at Ahmedabad. He's literally itching to get back to Cambridge to continue his PhD in physics. But then, the war means that Sarabhai cannot go back to Cambridge. He is devastated. all his plans, everything he was working toward, suddenly put on hold. What now? Well, thankfully, his family is well connected and he gets to continue his studies under the mentorship of Nobel laureate C.V. Raman at the Indian Institute of Science. During his tenure under Raman, he once goes on a daring scientific expedition to the Himalayan ranges in Kashmir. He has 40 pack ponies and 50 porters carrying a lot of delicate scientific equipment. But something weird starts happening. The Geiger counters start going nuts, registering higher and higher levels of radiation. Sarabhai is confused. What's going on? After some investigation, he figures it out. 2 words: cosmic rays. What's that and how is it connected to our story? Cosmic rays are high-energy particles that come from outer space. They originate from the sun or exploding stars and are constantly hitting the earth at all time. In fact, millions of them are passing through your body right this very moment.
Phantom invaders from outer space.
Scientists worldwide had been obsessing over these rays for years. But here's where it gets interesting for our story. So among all of these scientists who are studying this is another Indian scientist whose story is deeply linked with Sarabhai's and the lives of the millions of Indians they would go on to change. In fact, he's also studying under C.V. Raman at the same time. It was Dr. Homi Bhabha, the father of India's nuclear program. Bhabha and Sarabhai instantly bond over their shared interest of the study of science and space. As 2 scientists hailing from a scientifically ignorant country, the possibilities to them seemed endless. But back then, the thought of creating a space program in India is too far-reaching even for them. Even the US, which every one of us today knows as a space superpower, wasn't thinking about this until...
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket.
Sir, what do you think about this achievement of the Russians?
I think it's a remarkable thing. My only regret is that we couldn't get there first.
The World War is over, but America and Russia, or the Soviet Union, have started a new war. This is not a war of bullets and bombs, but of ideology and influence.
Everything is fine. Everything is fine.
Sputnik's launch takes this war into space and America has to respond. So just a year later, they announced their space program called
The National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
But while the Americans are threatened by Sputnik's launch, back in India, Sarabhai is looking up at the stars with wonder and then a moment of profound inspiration. He thinks, what if India also goes to space? It could help us create advanced technology which could potentially improve the life of every Indian. Now wait, I need you to stop and think about how far-fetched this thought is for a second. It's the 1960s and your country is barely developed, highly poverty-stricken and technologically backward. I mean, the entire country's GDP of $37 billion was smaller than NASA's budget of $65 billion. Forget about flying to space, we could barely walk. So, how do you turn this thought into reality? How do you convince the Indian government to spend money on going to space with political tensions rising and millions dying of hunger and poverty? Well, Sarabhai has an ace up his sleeve. Homi Bhabha has by now become the director of the Department of Atomic Energy and scientific advisor to the man who would help them fulfill their vision. A close friend who's not only a big believer in science, but also in a position of prominence in the government. This is none other than the former Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. So Bhabha convinces him to set up a space research department which leads us to the creation of the Indian National Committee of Space and Research, or INCOSPAR, in 1962. Sarabhai has of course made its head, and to finally start India's space journey, his first ambitious goal is to launch a sounding rocket. A sounding rocket is a research rocket which is launched into Earth's atmosphere to collect data. You know, in today's day and age, rockets have become commonplace. But to really understand why this was a complicated task, you need to know how rockets work. Now, you've probably heard that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. When you jump, you push down on the ground and the ground pushes you back with an equal force, lifting you into the air. This principle is the foundation of rocket science. The boosters of a rocket combust fuel, exerting a strong downward force that lifts the rocket upward. You can think of rockets as having two main components. One is payload, which is basically the stuff that rocket is carrying into space. This could be a satellite, a person, or a scientific device. The other main component of a rocket is everything else. The engines, boosters, computers, rocket fuel, etc. Essentially, it's all the equipment necessary to transport the payload. But here's something you might not know. Take a look at this rocket. What percentage of it do you think is the payload versus everything else? The answer, 1%. You see this part here? That's what the other 99% of the rocket is carrying. So why is there such a huge difference between the payload and fuel? Think about it like this. So you have 10 kg of payload and need 10 kg of fuel to lift it. Now, with that fuel included, you effectively have to carry 20 kg of weight. To lift this total weight, you'll need a little more fuel, let's say an additional 5 kg. Now, you're looking at needing enough fuel to carry 25 kg in total. This basically creates a feedback loop where more and more fuel is required to lift its own weight. This is why launching things into space is so challenging. It takes a lot of resources and some very precise calculations. How did they pull off this incredible feat? The story of the first rocket launch is my personal favorite. It's one filled with problems and failures and literally every excuse to give up. But what is also present at every step is the ingenious, creative engine spirit, or for lack of a better word, jugaad. Of course, at this point, India does not have the infrastructure to support rocket launches. We don't have the rocket launching facilities. We don't even have the equipment. We also don't have enough people with the know-how. So Sarabhai has to take external help. He approaches NASA to provide the rocket, France for the payloads, and the Soviets for the computer. All of them agree. In fact, France even lends the payload for free. Then Tumba, a small coastal fishing village in Kerala, is selected for the launch site. With the equipment ready and the plans laid out, now it's all about getting there. But nothing in the story comes easy. The roads are clearly not built for transporting rockets. With crores worth of equipment stranded in the middle of nowhere, they have to figure a way out. And their solution? Bullock carts and bicycles. The next big challenge? Convincing the villagers to vacate the place for a space experiment for nothing in return. Sarabhai approaches the priest of the local church to convince him to give them the area, and in the following Sunday service, the priest speaks to his congregation, urging them to consider Sarabhai's request. The words spoken on that day still echo in ISRO's mission. Science and spirituality have a common goal: to seek truth and to do good to humanity. How did the villagers respond? The stage is set. 21st November 1963. A huge crowd has gathered in Tumba to witness India's first rocket launch. An assembly of ministers, all the scientists and engineers who have dedicated more than 2 years of their lives to this project, and the Indians tuned in via radio, all waiting anxiously as the countdown begins. They are 10 seconds away from a new era. This historic launch kickstarted India's journey into space. Incospar was renamed as ISRO, and Sarabhai hailed a national hero. But the timeless question was raised again. Does India really need to go to space?
Yes.
Sarabhai had answers and had already set his sights on the next goal for India and ISRO. The goal was launching satellites and doing it on Indian-made rockets. But tragedy struck again, and before he could see this become a reality, in 1971, he passed away at the age of 52. Just a few hours before he passed, he selected a young scientist who would go on to make his vision a reality and put India on the global stage. Who was he?
खेती के साथ साथ किसान पशुपालन करते रहे हैं और
What you're watching right now is an agricultural program that was broadcast across 80 rural villages in Delhi in 1967. It was to teach farmers about pesticides, crop prices and monsoon. Nothing like this was ever done before, and you know what? It is the longest running program in India.
तब तक के लिए नमस्कार.
But how is this program connected to our story? Well, this program was a part of Sarabhai's broader vision of using space technology like satellite communications to improve the lives of the average Indian. But Sarabhai's vision was no easy undertaking. After his untimely death, the mantle of chairman fell to Satish Dhawan, a humble mathematician and engineer from Srinagar. The Krishi Darshan broadcast paved the way for ISRO to conduct larger satellite missions in the 70s, and in 1975, they conducted the biggest mission yet. The Satellite Instructional Television Experiment, or SITE, was a project in which educational programs were broadcast across 2,400 villages, teaching rural India about family planning, agriculture, health, hygiene, and much more. This was the world's largest sociological experiment ever conducted and demonstrated the power of satellite technology and mass communication. Sarabhai's vision was coming alive, but it was still incomplete. See, to launch a satellite, you need to have something called a satellite launch vehicle, or SLV. This is basically the rocket that places the satellite into Earth's orbit, an exceedingly difficult task. Up until this point, we had to depend on our foreign allies like NASA and the Soviets for launching our satellites. NASA's Atlas 6 was used for SITE, and the Soviets' Cosmos 3M was used to launch another satellite the same year, the Aryabhatta. But Sarabhai's vision? He wanted India to have its own indigenous SLV. This would be the next big leap in the Indian space program and would unlock the true potential of satellite technology. It was time for India to leave the nest. Remember the young engineer that Sarabhai had selected to fulfill his vision? His time had come now. Satish Dhawan approached him and put him in charge of India's very first SLV project. His name? APJ Abdul Kalam. Yes, the future missile man and president of India. Dr. Kalam and his team were tasked to create a rocket called the SLV-3 with the capacity to carry 40 kg of payload to be placed 300 km away from the Earth in low Earth orbit. To understand why this mission was extremely difficult, we need to understand a little bit about how orbits work. So how do satellites orbit the Earth? Are they just constantly trying to stay afloat? It's actually insane how this works, so let's get into it. Take this ball. What happens if I throw this ball? It travels through the air for a few seconds and falls to the ground because of gravity. Now, if I throw it with a little more force, it travels a little further through the air, but yet again, gravity wins down to the ground. But, and here's the insane part, if I throw it with just enough speed, precisely 7.8 kilometers per second, it travels so far up into the air that as it falls inward, the Earth curves away from it. Now, the ball is actually constantly falling, but the Earth is constantly moving away from it. Congratulations, you have successfully launched a ball into orbit. This is obviously slightly simplified, but this is the crux of how satellites work. They're launched into the air at high enough speeds such that they're just too far away from Earth to actually hit the ground. It's a cool trick of physics, making use of gravity and the fact that the Earth is a sphere. Now, the speed with which it's launched determines the kind of orbit the satellite takes: low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, or high Earth orbit. But if you want to leave the Earth altogether, you need to be traveling at a speed of at least 11.2 kilometers per second. This is known as escape velocity, and when you're traveling this fast, you have enough force to break free from Earth's gravitational pull without further propulsion. This is essentially how we get into outer space. Now, with the science all figured out, the SLV engineered, and the payload ready, we had arrived at D-Day. The feeling that day was reminiscent of 17 years ago when we had launched our first sounding rocket. The same anticipation, the same tension, and the same deafening, nervous silence. Ignition. Liftoff. The air is filled with the loud roar of the engines. The vibration on the ground can be felt miles away. Everything seems to be going fine, and then the rocket changes its direction. A slight dip in its axis. That's all it takes. Instead of heading upwards, it tilts and starts moving down, eventually crashing and drowning in the Bay of Bengal. Silence again. The mission is over. 10 years of hard work has failed. 20 crores, which is almost 400 crores today, has been lost. And the perennial question is asked again. Is this worth it? But for the people at ISRO, the main question was, what went wrong? A review committee set up, and it turns out that just moments before the launch, there was a leak in its control system. Dr. Kalam was even warned about this by his team. But since the rocket had sufficient fuel to reach its destination, he felt confident and gave the green light for the launch. You know, when I read this, I felt that this moment would have crushed Dr. Kalam's resolve. And it nearly did. But you know what? Instead of letting Dr. Kalam face the media, Satish Dhawan went ahead and took the blame upon himself.
What Satish Dhawan said, I want to support my technologists and scientists and staff so that next year they succeed. So he took the whole blame himself.
Now, despite the SLV-3's failure and the barrage of criticism by the media, Dr. Kalam and ISRO did not give up. In fact, it's something which you will see is constant in ISRO's story. This sheer resilience to keep moving onward and upward. Just 1 year after the SLV-3's failure, ISRO made its second attempt.
All stations stand by for the time mark. This is mission control. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This time, the rocket not only took off, but surpassed all expectations. It placed the satellite it carried, called the Rohini, into an orbit that was higher than what was planned. This moment made India the 6th country to have the capability to launch its own satellites in the world.
Next year, July 18, 1980, when he succeeded, Professor Dhawan said, you go and conduct the press conference. Do you follow what this means? It means when the failure occurred, the leader took it up. When the success came, he gives to his team. That's the first.
You know, this successful launch of the SLV helped ISRO in creating more homegrown rockets like the PSLV and the GSLV. In fact, it was the updated model of the PSLV which was used for the historic Chandrayaan-1 mission. Chandrayaan-1 was a big moment not only for India, but for the whole world. The orbiter which ISRO launched found the presence of water molecules on the moon's surface, a huge discovery for scientists and astronomers all over the world. With Chandrayaan-1, ISRO proved that India could dream bigger. The best, though, was yet to come.
Approximately 3 minutes away from the predicted time when the spacecraft telemetry would reach the ground station,
if going to the moon was a big step, Mars was a cosmic leap. With Mangalyaan, we not only beat China to become the first Asian country to reach the Red Planet, but also put our Jugaad mindset on the global stage. While it cost $108 million for Hollywood to send Matt Damon to Mars, it only cost us $73 million. But more than the cost, what made the Mangalyaan success such a big achievement was that ISRO did it in the first ever attempt, which nobody has ever done. And it's pretty wild because going to Mars is no easy task. You know, this mission was made possible by the efforts of so many people within ISRO, but one notable figure was Ritu Karidhar. Her work on the mission earned her the nickname Rocket Woman of India. India landing on Mars also became quite the rage in foreign media. Some, like the New York Times, even congratulated us with this cartoon depiction, which was honestly quite racist and disgraceful, and they even apologized for it later. But it hardly mattered because ISRO had arrived. India had arrived.
The Indian Space Agency has become part of an elite group of space explorers. It's also become the world's first no-frills, low-cost space agency.
But again, like every journey, not every turn was smooth.
India has lost contact with a lunar explorer just as it was about to land on the surface of the moon.
The mission's objective was to reach the lunar South Pole, something which nobody had ever done before because it's a nearly impossible task. But Chandrayaan 2's failure was only a minor setback. On 23rd August 2023, we achieved the impossible with Chandrayaan 3 when the Vikram lander landed on the south pole of the moon, creating history not just for us as a nation, but humanity as a species. The mission also marked the beginning of a new economy in India, the space tech economy. Over the last 5 years, ISRO has empowered multiple startups to provide key technology for space missions, such as specialized components for propulsion systems, rocket engines, and spacesuits. Sarabhai's incredible vision from over 60 years ago of utilizing space technology to improve the lives of Indians is still being honored. In fact, this has translated into real environmental and economic benefits for us. For example, fishermen have been able to save around 15 to 20,000 crores every year because the satellite information helps them save time and fuel in identifying the best place to catch fish. They've created over 96,000 jobs in public and private sectors and also received 1,100 crores in foreign exchange. They've also collaborated with the government to help predict weather, avert damage from natural disasters, gain insight about crops, and expand medical services in rural areas. From space, there are no nations, no borders, and no divides. Just one global community of human beings. And in that spirit, just like we were aided by our allies in getting off the ground, ISRO is now returning the favor. They've helped over 15 countries in launching their satellites. Most recently, they even helped Japan become the 5th nation to land on the moon. You know, starting from our first launch in Tumba till now, so many people have been key players in this journey. Scientists, engineers, astronauts, even the peons and the clerks, people who work tirelessly in the background whose efforts we might never hear about. But as awesome as this journey has been until now, there's something more coming that you all need to wait for. ISRO's plans for the future are something literally out of a science fiction novel. And the future of space exploration is something that we might actually get to experience in our own lifetimes. We've saved the best for the last. Buckle up for a journey around the universe because this is just the beginning. In 2009, a report came out that an Australian fan of Shah Rukh Khan gave him a gift unlike any other in the world. It was a piece of land. Now, if you're thinking that doesn't sound very odd, you should know that this piece of land was literally on the moon. Now, as per international laws, no individual can claim legal ownership over the moon, and so the gift may have been a symbolic gesture, but it sparks an interesting question. Who owns the moon? In the last few years, countries and even private companies have reignited the race to the moon. A big reason why they have restarted this race is because of what ISRO found during Chandrayaan missions. Water. The presence of water, according to scientists, indicates that the moon could be used as a base for further space research. For example, we could build an astronomical observatory on the moon. Because of no atmospheric interference, we would be able to observe the planets both within and beyond our solar system, find potentially habitable or Earth-like planets, and maybe finally get closer to the age-old question, are we alone? In fact, this is something that the chairman of ISRO also revealed that they are working towards. For instance, with Gaganyaan, ISRO is going to send 4 Indian astronauts to space for the very first time, which, if it becomes successful, could pave the way for them to conduct more human spaceflight missions. ISRO is also working towards setting up a space station in orbit, which together with the Gaganyaan could help us in pushing the boundaries of space exploration. Talking about pushing the boundaries, this possibility of making the moon a second base could actually make it possible for us to do deeper space exploration and take the next big evolutionary leap that scientists and sci-fi writers have been talking about for decades, that is, becoming a multi-planetary species. But now, after all this, we come back to the important question we began with: is this all worth it? Is it worth spending hundreds of crores of rupees to go to space, especially when we have other problems here on Earth that need to be fixed? Poverty, hunger, injustice.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex, Tom, and Varev, for recommending this documentary. It was really interesting. I learned a lot about the timelines and the Indian Space Research Organization, who set it up and how it started, and the initial successes, the hard, tough failures. And and even then more success. And I really liked what she said is that the best is yet to come. And it truly is. It ended in a unique way with where she said it was spiritual. And, you know, when she's talked about that pale blue dot, I was reminded of a video actually that I watched on Sadhguru. And I can't remember the exact question, but it was like the presenter had asked him, like, what is he aware of? And he said that, you know, that he was aware that, you know, we are just specks, you know, like a speck of dust or on a tiny planet that's hurtling through space, and what a miracle it is to be here. And it is a miracle. And going to space it's something that helps, you know, economically and humanity, not just for India, but globally. And India is a part of that. I had some comments on my last SpaceX video that, you know, India is not a superpower or space superpower. It's not. But that doesn't mean that they can't be part of it. That doesn't mean that they can't also contribute. And that doesn't mean that one day they won't be a space superpower. I believe they're on that trip, they're on that journey. And India can do so much. So thanks so much for recommending this video. It was great. If you like the content, please give a like. Please give a subscribe. If you'd like me to see something else, please put it in the comments. If you have something to say, put it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. As always, I love you and bye-bye.